Hi.
Hi.
I never thought we'd get here, but here we are.
Let's get her to it.
Let's get at it, eh?
Yeah.
So we're here today to talk about what happened.
Okay.
You did an amazing job. You produced something incredible. And because you made something so valuable, it was stolen from you.
Well, all of us, the investors, and it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, after the work that you put in and being locked out and having it taken from you, it was pretty awful. So we're here today to talk about what happened with River Green, Thunder Bay, Inc.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about what happened with Sophia's Garden,
Yeah.
Artisan. And I think that the story needs to come out. It's 5 years in the making.
Yeah.
So it's time.
It's been some time.
It's time. So why don't I really quickly start off by talking about just some of the key points of the timeline,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of fill it in from there.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
That'll be a good way of doing it.
So back in 2018, you were recruited
Yeah.
by Jim Peterson and John Beals
Yes.
to start a cannabis production facility corporation,
Yeah.
and it was called River Green Thunder Bay Inc.
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to get this wrong. And you spent 2.5 years working alongside a few other people to build it, design it, and get the license.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
a standard cultivation license.
yeah, so we're talking now. The building itself was pretty incredible. It was a 100,000 square foot building.
Yeah.
80,000 square feet of bud.
Yeah.
I think it was about 34 grow rooms, about 2,500 square foot each.
32.
32?
grow rooms, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then space for a farm and gate that came in afterwards because the regulations changed.
And the
So-
farm and gate is a store.
Is a store, yeah. So we could sell directly out of our own facility into our own store and to the general public.
Okay.
So that was sectioned off for that.
Okay. And then it had about 20,000 square feet for administration offices?
Yes, which consisted of curing rooms, the vault, and all the admin facilities, basically. Washrooms, everything were on that floor.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
That was the middle floor.
Was it a 4-story building?
5 stories.
5.
Yeah, so you had
Wow.
two stories below admin and 2 stories above.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Jim Peterson had the building,
Yes, he did.
which
Yep.
was located at 600 Montreal Street in Thunder Bay.
Yep.
And then John Beals, he was, what he was going to do was handle kind of like the generaling, so
Yeah.
the trades and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then what was your role?
Building and building and writing all the standard operating procedures required for GPP, the growing practices, good growing practices of the entire facility.
Did
So
you have to design the grow rooms?
all right from scratch, the hallways, like right down to the mechanical equipment that was going to go in the hallways, water chillers, AC unit, like everything was plus bypassing with dollies. Like it was quite a bit of figuring out. Yeah.
So you had to design the grow systems.
Yeah.
Now those grow systems you had kind of over the course, and I don't want to call him out, but you're older.
Not
20.
The gray hair gives it away.
Right, my silver fox. I should explain I'm married to him, so I will be kind and I love him, so I'm in his corner. I should put that out right away. So we've been together for what, about 15 years?
Yeah.
And I was by your side through this whole thing.
Yes.
So not only did you you brought in all of your knowledge and experience to design the grow systems.
Yeah.
You brought in the genetics. It was your seed collection.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Over many years of collecting.
Before it was cool.
Before it was cool. Well, it was always been cool, but
Now, to be clear, Brad does have a CTLS background check. So what that means is he was evaluated over about an 18-month period by the federal government and approved to be not only the master grower, but the responsible person in charge. Now, that role means that you are ultimately responsible for everything that happens in a cannabis facility, good or bad,
Yeah.
and you answer for that. And if the plants are being worked with and if I ever get anything wrong, tell me.
No, good. You're
If
doing
the
good.
plants are being worked with, if they're being harvested or watered or anything, someone with a CTLS has to be on site while that happens. So your role was well, when I say key, I mean you were at the top.
Well, on the cannabis side, because you have the administration side, that's your CEO, CFO, president, like all the regular roles that they play. But on the cannabis side, for the standard cultivation license, it was RPIC, master grower, and head of security.
Okay.
We didn't need a processor at that point because we were just going for the standard cultivation, and then we were going to amend in the processing and the farm and gate when we build that out.
Okay.
I set it up so that we could actually do the construction on the farm and gate without interrupting any of the flow of the facility.
So who was your head of security?
Jordan Smith, he was an ex-OPP officer and very qualified for what he was doing.
Doesn't get any better than having an ex-police officer,
You'd think, yeah,
you'd think.
yeah.
We'll get into that though. So now we've established that, well, actually, it sounds like there's 4 key roles. There's the head of security,
Yeah.
the RPIC, which is the responsible person in charge, the quality assurance officer.
Yeah.
That's the one that signs off and says, yeah, the weed is ready to go to the market.
Yeah,
And-
that at that time though, because we were talking about 2020, right? So at that time, we didn't need the quality assurance officer because we were selling directly to the government.
Okay, so
So-
of the 4,
Yeah,
there was 3 that you had to get your license. So
Yes.
head of security, RPIC, RPIC, we know what that means, responsible person in charge, and then the master grower.
yes,
Now, of those 3 positions, you had 2.
yes,
So you were the master grower and the RPIC.
yeah,
Okay. So you guys, now John, love him. We love John. John is older, and my understanding is what John was going to do was handle the trades, and his background was in building.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, development and whatnot. Yeah.
So he started on the project, and then I think a month or 2 in, he ended up having to go home because he wasn't feeling good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, you took on his role. So that means that you were essentially generally in the project, dealing with trades,
Yeah.
on top of what you were doing anyway.
Well, and it comes down to as well, like when you're doing the generaling of a standard cultivation license or any of these licenses that are out there, whether it's micro or just processing, you have to know the regulations very well because there's building requirements for even putting in a door. There's a lot to it.
What about your security system? What did that cost?
The security system is a must. That cannot be leased, it can't be rented, it has to be purchased, and there's, that was about 1.4 million for
Whoa.
just the security system, yeah.
So how much money was invested to get it to license?
Honestly, I don't remember. Millions of dollars.
I mean, I heard about 9-10 million.
Yeah, around there. It
Yeah.
could be light, I didn't do the budgeting, that was the CEO's job and whatnot, but
Well, you can do it all.
No, and I
That
tried
wouldn't
to stay
really
away
work.
from the corporate side as much as possible. Like with the responsible person in charge, you're basically in charge of bonding the company, which means you have to know the Cannabis Act and the regulations inside and out. And I was the only one on site that knew that. At
Yeah,
that time.
I got the sense that you were the only one that had really read the Cannabis Act front to back.
It's like my Bible. Like, I refer to it every day.
I know.
There's copies all over the house, and like whenever
know.
I was referring to anything, I would have to just double check, right? Like, because you can't remember everything, and it's a huge document. Like, it's not a small thing to do.
I think it's like almost 2,000 pages, isn't it?
Well, it's combined with the Food and Drug Act, and it's combined with all sorts of, like, there's a lot of outlying things that you have to keep in mind when you're building a facility and operating a facility.
Well, I mean, you're responsible there. Now, my understanding, there was quite a few investors around, let's say under 30. I don't know if it's 26 or 27, but
Yeah, no, there
around
was-
30.
Yeah.
So these people trusted you guys, put in their money.
Yeah.
So it was imperative that you did things properly and that you followed the law.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's fair to say.
There's only one way to get your license, and that is the proper way. And Health Canada is the regulating body, along with CRA. They're kind of in on it together. You pay taxes to both of them.
They work together.
You know, yeah. I mean, they don't accept. Almost, yeah. Like it's got to be done their way, and it's not just us. It's just everybody in the industry has to do it that way.
So we were living in Thunder Bay.
Yes.
And it was long days.
Very long days. Basically from 7 to 6:37, and then I would do paperwork and scheduling for trades and engineers and everything else at home after the long day at work. And then get up and
and do it again.
18 months of straight work. Worked on the weekends, worked on every day. I had to be there with the CTLS clearance and doing what I was doing. I was always present. Like I couldn't leave to go to lunch or anything. Like it came to me, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So, it was a very long 18 months of my life.
So you guys did the work, designed the rooms,
Yeah.
got the building up to snuff.
Yeah.
And when was it licensed by Health Canada?
Oh God, July. It's either 4th or 6th of 2020.
Okay.
You know that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you got a 2-day window, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it was then.
We'll let it go.
Yeah.
And the whole thing kind of kicked off. It looks like you're about 2018, the fall of 2018.
Is when we started, yes. And that was the initial discussions between the founders of the company and whatnot, and starting the corporation and everything else. So that took a bit of time, but the actual sitting down with the investors was in early 2019.
Wow.
And then the initial investment came in, and we
Off to the races,
busted a nut. Yeah. No, sorry.
That's okay. No, that's all right. So a lot of money invested.
Yes.
A lot of time.
An incredible amount of time.
Incredible amount of time and effort.
Yeah.
So license comes in, and then now, are you able to start growing before the license hits?
You're allowed to put in genetics, but you're not allowed to do anything with them. So you can water them, keep them alive, but that's not until a certain point of your application. You have to have the foundation to keep them alive. So the rooms had to be built, the lights had to be on, the reservoirs, the nutrient distribution center, everything had to be done in order to put your genetics in. At that point, yes, you could put in genetics and keep it alive. You're not allowed to flower, not allowed to, you can defoliate and prune back and whatnot, but you can't do anything.
So basically, you could start growing, but you couldn't put them in bud.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason I ask is because a lot of plants were, not just mother plants, but a lot of plants were put in.
Yes.
Do you remember how many approximately?
Well, I mean, when I did the genetics, I started with the ones that I was going to put into production immediately, because we had time to phase in other genetics, other strains. So it was just basically 2 strains that I put in. And one was a heavy indica and one was a sativa dominant, like hitting both sides of the scale.
But how many plants did you put in, would you say?
There was 60
No, I mean,
mother plants.
So you had the mother plants.
Yeah.
But then in the grow rooms,
Yeah.
you had, what was it, 2,000-3,000?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I'll explain how that works then.
Because I want to lead into how that was stolen.
Okay, so what happens is once you're licensed, at that point you can start taking clones. So the mother plants were in there, and they were massive, like 6-7 feet high, 6 or 7, as wide as this room, each plant. So we were able to take off 7,000-8,000 clones. the cuttings, and we did that right away.
Wow.
So in the 3 rooms that I filled immediately, there was about 60, I mean, I know the numbers if you give me time, but about 62 to 6,400 plants in the facility.
Okay, so
at
that
time.
was the first crop of river grain.
Yeah, yeah. The initial startup was that.
Now, my understanding is those plants would have produced about $3 to $4 million worth of bud.
Well,
We did the math.
Well over $1 million. Let's say that. You know, depending on the pricing.
Yeah,
Right.
but 3 to
Right.
4 million, I think. You know what? Let's do this. Let's call it 3.
Okay.
Because when you're talking about that many plants,
Yeah.
if they pulled off an ounce of dried bud, it would be this. But if they pulled off 3, it would be that, right? So I think that it's pretty reasonable when you're talking thousands of plants to say that about $3 million, because you guys had the opportunity to sell that at full retail because you were going to have your own store.
Yeah.
So the money was there. Now, when we look at the taxation rates, that would have equated to about, within a buck or two, $750,000 in tax revenue.
Yes.
Okay, so if that was not harvested, sold, and given to the government, it's a pretty considerable loss, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, and when you're starting a facility, you have to kind of think of the government as a silent partner, because they take 36. I could
No,
be
I
off
think it
on
was 28%.
something like that.
Yeah.
They're a huge contributor to every decision you make, and they. So I always considered them as a partner because they, rain or shine, they're there to take their share of the money. You know, and yeah, it would have been up around this $600,000-700,000 mark that they didn't receive.
That they would have got.
Yeah.
So is that why well, let's put it this way. My understanding was that the record keeping is not just like, hey, we've got 20 or 30 plants. It's down to the gram, down to the seed,
yeah.
down to like
Yeah,
very
I mean, when you're
specific.
doing your standard operating procedures for a licensed facility, and I'm not going to be the only one that has to attest to this because it is such a massive undertaking. And if you take a leaf off of a plant, it has to be weighed. So when you defoliate a room, which in hydroponics we defoliate quite often.
Yeah,
right?
not a dirt grower. Hydroponics.
It adds up, and you have to digitally put it in and have a paper copy in your file room as well. So I mean, everything is documented, and the security system inside the grow rooms, outside the grow rooms, outside the building, everything is recorded. So I mean, you need witnesses. So it wouldn't be just the people doing it, weighing it. I would have to sign off on it. I'd have to be present as a CTLS cleared to witness the weighs, the weights, and everything else. Like you had to be there.
How many cameras were there
Well, on that floor,
in the building?
At the building, at the time there was well over 200.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa. So my understanding with Health Canada is that you have to store 2 years of camera footage so that Health Canada can come back at any time and within that 2-year window.
Yeah, I mean, for the primary auditing purposes for Health Canada is through the security system, because they have 2 years of uninterrupted feed, 24/7, 365 days a year. And one of the reasons it costs so much is the archiving and the servers.
Storage.
Yeah. You know, the cameras aren't that bad. It's the heart of the system that was expensive.
Yeah, to store all that. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Well, I
no,
mean, you can
it's-
imagine.
Yeah.
I'm imagining, my God, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So it is, let's put it this way, it would be a violation of the Cannabis Act if you do not have 2 years of camera footage stored. That's a violation.
Yeah.
So now that first crop, you had all the money from the investors.
Yeah.
That was spent.
Well,
So you guys really needed that first crop in order to pay the bills and keep going.
Ongoing, yeah,
So-
we did, and we were counting on it.
So if it was stolen or died or what have you, it would have been catastrophic.
There was no chance of it dying. I was growing it myself, so
Fair enough.
it was never going to fail.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
I have a horticulture background and irrigation background. Like, I know hydroponics and hydraulics like the back of my hand. I'm not worried. I was never, ever worried about a failed crop or like your clone's not taking or anything, because I've done it so often. So at the end of the day, we were counting on it.
I bet.
You know, because it was a for sure thing.
Yeah.
So.
So the license comes in.
Yep.
You're happily growing. Things are going good.
I wouldn't say happily. Like it was a lot of work.
Well, you're growing.
And it was a lot different than under the ACMPR, the medical cannabis. You know, you're able to. You don't have to document like you do with
Right.
Health
But
Canada.
my point is that you've got the license.
Yeah.
Plants are in production.
Yeah.
And here we are to the races.
Yeah. No, we were off and running.
So what happened October 4th of the same year?
October 4th. Well, it started a little bit before that. At one point, they wanted to get rid of me.
Oh, you know what? We should probably talk about this. So some of the people, we've talked about how you were the head of, or who the head of security was,
Yep.
Jordan Smith. We've got you as the RPIC and master grower.
Yep.
So that's the production side. Now let's talk about the admin side. We've got Jeff Burrell. You brought him in. He's a friend. You brought him in.
As CEO.
Yep. So he
Yep.
was CEO. And then there was Michael Adladakis, I want to say.
Not in River Green. He wasn't. No.
Oh, he wasn't in River Green?
No.
Okay. So can you talk to me a little bit about who did what on the admin side?
Well, Jeff lived in Toronto and came up every couple weeks. You know, he was in touch with everybody daily, but he wasn't present the entire time. So he would come up.
But what role did he have?
He was the CEO.
Okay, so he had that job, whether he was commuting.
Yeah.
But that's the
Yeah.
job he had.
And Jim Peterson was the president of the company. And I was vice president of the company.
Okay.
And took over secretary treasurer once John
Went home.
Went home.
Yeah.
Left. So again, on the corporate side, I had responsibilities as well, and had to make sure that everybody on the corporate side who had no idea of what the cannabis read, okay, like the regulations and why we have to do it this way, and
Yeah.
they had no idea.
I remember you were fighting with them a lot because they wanted to do things that you
Yeah.
knew you couldn't do by
We
law.
were not allowed to do that, and I would be the no man in every conversation. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. We can't export to the United States. That's a hard no, you know.
Yeah.
And
Not looking to go to jail here.
yeah, and they would debate me about it, and I'm okay. Break out the Cannabis Act, and I'm here you go. Slide it across the table, and they'd all share it and realize that yeah, that's a hard no. And I did that.
What a waste of time.
I did that literally 20, 30 times a day on the corporate side. They all have grand ideas, and I understand, you know, like it's not a construction company. We are a pharmaceutical company. You have to basically follow the protocols that you wrote in your standard operating procedures.
Well, there's
that
what
were
you can do
approved.
and what you can't do. That's
It's
just a bottom line.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And the regulations make it very clear. So I was not popular because I was the only one that actually read and understood the Cannabis Act. That's why I was the RPIC. And, you know, I was constantly the guy that had to poop on the parade.
Yeah, and
You know?
say no.
Yeah.
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 So one question I want to ask, because we're talking a lot about, you know, what went in to do this.
Yeah.
And what I think a lot of folks may not know is that there's an entire industry around consultants who handle applications on behalf of applicants to Health Canada. So who handled, or who did you guys hire to put together your application for Health Canada?
Okay, so when we first started in 2018, or it might have been early 2019, CCI was the largest, from what I remember, they were the largest consulting company in Canada.
Now, CCI stands for
Cannabis Compliance Corporation.
Inc., I think it
Inc.,
was. Yeah,
CCI,
that's what
yeah.
it was, yeah.
And that company was the best in the industry, and they're also the most expensive. So
Who knew?
but
What are the odds?
you pay for what you get. So halfway through the application, Deloitte Canada purchased CCI, and then I had to sign a new engagement letter with them halfway through, which was confusing because like when you hire a consulting company, you're giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars to do their job, and because Health Canada on the application has only the RPIC as their contact, which was me. I had to re-sign with Deloitte, and because I was the RPIC, I had to re-sign with Deloitte, which means that they have to talk with me.
Now, when you say things like they, we're talking about Deloitte and Health Canada.
Yes.
Okay, so by you signing that contract with Deloitte, that means that Deloitte needed to clear things with you, communicate with you.
Yes. Yeah.
There wasn't anyone else in the company that could make major decisions unless it was cleared by you first.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's certain things that I didn't really need to be bothered with, and they understand that as well.
Little
So,
stuff, okay.
Yeah.
But big stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Health Canada, when they want to communicate with an applicant, which was us, River Green, they wouldn't email the president, the CEO. They email the RPIC, and it's my job to go to the CEO and collect the information and send it back. Okay, that's how the application gets done, and that's how it operates after the application. So following the same protocol, Deloitte and the compliance, they come to me, I find out everything they need and then send it back. And they speak for me to Health Canada. So they're in between, there's me or River Green, CCI, and Health Canada. And what I tell them, they clean up, put it in proper format, and send it on to Health Canada so that it goes through without a problem.
I mean, because I found that Health Canada kind of has their own language.
They do.
Yeah.
Yes. It is. Yeah.
And really, the person you're hiring to prepare your application is like your translator.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, do you remember how much money River Green paid to Deloitte to do the application?
Well over 300,000.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's a little bit more than I remember. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, okay, so they successfully prepared they helped you get the license.
Yes.
They pulled it off.
Yeah.
So do you remember at any time that another company that did this kind of consulting work visited River Green in the building?
Yes. Yeah. Can Delta. Jeff Burrell brought up an investor from Toronto so that we could expand and keep going. And through that process, Can Delta was introduced. They flew up from, I believe, Toronto.
Yeah, I think so.
And visited the site, and essentially were there to talk me into canceling the contract with Deloitte and signing with them to finish the application, which made absolutely no sense to me because that's just, to me, they've got us there, and
You wanted to be loyal.
loyal, and I have no idea. I know what CCI has to offer, and I don't know what they have to offer, and I'm not gambling with investors' dollars when it comes to that. So mine was a hard no, go away.
Yeah.
And but everybody else, essentially, they ended up leaving.
Yeah, well, you said no. Like,
Yeah.
you guys had already gone through with Deloitte most of the way.
Yes. Yeah.
And not to mention Deloitte, if I remember correctly, I mean, they do about $6 billion in business annually here in Canada alone.
Yeah.
And they're everywhere in the world. So if you've signed a contract with them and then you try to break it,
Yeah.
their legal department is probably not one you want to tangle with, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense to fire them at that point.
No, and I was extremely happy. You know, like the account managers that I was working with directly every day, all day. For
Pervy.
that. Yes.
Yeah, I remember Pervy.
Pervy,
She
yeah.
was great.
Yeah, and you know, there's literally thousands of emails that I got from her, and
In a good way.
That was my job to, when she asked for questions, I would have to go and source those along with doing all the other stuff, the trades and organizing and everything else.
Man.
So yes, it was I was very happy with them. They were patient. They knew when to push at the right time. They were very professional.
So Deloitte.
Deloitte, CCI, yeah.
Okay. What was CanDelta's biggest thing that they like promoted themselves on?
They were all ex-compliance officers with Health Canada.
Oh, so they worked in the cannabis division at Health Canada.
Yes.
The founders, some of them.
When I met them, they were fairly small. So there was only 4 of them, I believe. And there was only 2 that came up. And I can't remember their names
Right.
for the life of me. But I spent the day listening. They did the tour and everything of the facility and saw what we built.
Oh, so they saw the security system. They saw the work. They saw all the components and assets in the building.
Oh yeah, a full tour, inside and out. You know, just because you have the cannabis inside, you have a lot of security protocols outside of the building. The armor clad, the gate 12-foot high, razor wire. It's a prison. You know, like it's not something that you can get out of, let alone get in. And so they saw all of that, and I gave them a full tour so that they understood. And it was more to Jeff's liking.
Who was pushing to hire CanDelta?
Jeff.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, Peterson was Jim Peterson was on board with that as well. But again, you know, I discussed it with the investors as well. It wasn't just my decision, but you know, we took money from people, and I had a very strong feeling that changing a consulting company right at the end is just bad karma.
Yeah, well, it wasn't
You
a
know?
good move, yeah.
No, and so ultimately we kept with Delta and CCI.
So is it safe to say that the founders of CanDelta, they were previous cannabis compliance employees?
Yes.
They had, they were the ones who actually processed applications.
Yeah, I don't.
I
know
mean,
what
let's
their-
put it this way. They worked in the department that dealt with applications.
Yeah, they.
That was that
understand-
whole
Yeah,
area.
they understand that side of it, 100%.
Okay.
I would think, hopefully.
Yeah, so they would definitely have connections within Health Canada. They would know it inside and out, which I find interesting because when you've got employees who used to work for the government, especially when it comes to cannabis production licenses, when they leave and then they go and start their own consulting companies, you know, that creates a little bit of potential for shenanigans because they've got friends and inside information. And I hope that they would use that in an appropriate way and not try to, you know, be up to anything naughty. But so at this point, you stayed with, yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. We're wired for sound here, so that might come through. So CanDelta saw the building, they walked it, and you said, no, moving on.
Yep.
Okay, so we're with Deloitte. Now, plants are in the ground. You guys are off to the races. Was there anything that happened other than them trying to do things that you knew would violate the Cannabis Act? Was there anything else that kind of was a red flag or raised concerns for you?
Not off the top of my head. Like I was so busy with what I was doing, didn't really have the finger on the pulse of anything outside of it.
Well, you can't do it all.
No, this is usually a team effort. But I was wearing a lot of hats at that facility. But I don't want to fail. I didn't want to fail, and we didn't. We were licensed. But again, even after licensing, the investors were just pushing for stuff that, like once you get licensed, you have to commission the rooms, you have to commission the buildings.
What does that mean?
you have to basically test everything.
Makes sense.
You know, for you know, pressure testing basically is
Yeah.
what you're doing, making sure everything is going to run so that when you do put things into full operation, you're not failing, right? You know, the HVACs have to be calibrated with the pressure deficit in the rooms and all sorts of things for humidity. Everything has to coincide. So that's called commissioning.
Okay.
And there's a whole process to that. Okay, and you have to sign off on that. That's if you're going to do any change controls or deviations from the standard operating procedures that Health Canada has said, okay, you do these and you got your license. But we still have an opportunity when we're commissioning to change those, and those are what we do is commission it, and change controls come in, and you know that didn't really quite work out well enough, or it's impeding our ability to actually grow. It sounded good at the time, but now that plants are in and we're doing it and commissioning the rooms, that's not going to work. So we nix it and get rid of it and put in a new SOP and sign it in, and I have to sign and author it and everything else as the RPIC and master grower and the head of security have to sign.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we could change things a bit.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're licensed.
Yep.
And you guys are growing and still working hard and doing all that stuff. Now, you and John Beals, did you guys have the most shares in River Green?
We had majority shares, yes.
You guys together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As founders, and Peterson, Jim Peterson had, I think, equal to John. I can't remember, but.
So how did that work when you had so many other investors and only 100 shares to go around? Was there a company that they formed, or how did that work?
Well, they had an outside investment company. A number of people joined into this investment company, and that investment company bought shares in River Green.
Okay.
So they were not, and they were all accredited. They have their own.
Okay. What was the name of the company?
For Christ.
Gig.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I had a brain fart
I'm here to
there.
help.
Yeah, and I don't know what GIG stands for.
That's
but
fine.
That's just the abbreviation. It has nothing to do with River Green, other than
Okay.
the fact that they invested and
And
bought shares.
who was the president of Gig?
Dominique, not at that time. Dominique wasn't the president at that time. I believe it was. I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly can't remember, because you got to remember, like, that's not River Green.
Right.
That's somebody's entirely other corporation, so I don't really care.
Yeah, no,
You
fair.
know.
Well, it's a lot to keep track of. So, but Dominic Chavagne, was that Chavagne?
Was a large contributor. He was one of the major investors in the gig. Okay, so like I think they invested 3.8 million,
Whoa,
and
sorry.
like 1.2 of that came from Dom, I believe. Again, I didn't see all the
Okay.
documents, but I believe he was one of the larger investors in
But
the gig group.
Okay, but fair enough though. He was the president. He is, like, my understanding is he's the president of Gig Group. He was.
Yeah, down the road. Yeah, he stepped in and became the president of the company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you don't have a CTLS, and if you aren't sitting on the board, because I remember I heard the term care and control a lot. Are you allowed to make decisions for a production facility if you don't have a CTLS?
Not at all.
Okay. So, and that's called care and control?
Yeah, care and control. Basically, any day-to-day operation inside the facility, like as soon as you cross that fence on the outside of the building, you have to have a CTLS cleared individual at all times. Doesn't have to necessarily be me, but it had to be someone. And at that time, Jim Peterson lived in Toronto, and Jeff was
In Toronto?
in Toronto.
Yeah, he never moved up.
Yeah, and Jordan lived in Thunder Bay, the head of security. You know, so we'd share the responsibility of going in if a trade had to go in, or you know, like in off hours and whatnot. We'd share the responsibility. One of us had to be there. They couldn't get in the building without one of us there.
Okay, so if the plants were being worked on, I mean, basically a CTLS person needs to be there just whenever. Like,
Well, it's not just that. The way that our building was set up, if the admin wanted to go in, so it had nothing to do with the growing side of things, you couldn't get in there and do your work as just an employee, whether you're a bookkeeper or CEO or anything. Like, you had to have a CTLS person there in order for them to be there.
okay, so at this point, you guys are growing, you're off to the races.
Yeah.
And the email that I'm going to refer to later talks about the meeting they had, because I know that, you know, the founders, other than you and John, they were keen to get control of the company, get the assets, get the building, get everything, but they wanted to get rid of you and John, which we'll touch on that later in that email.
Yeah.
So leading up to October 4th, I was in the car with you.
Yeah.
Our son was in the car.
Yeah.
From what I remember, you told me we needed to swing by the facility. You needed to go in and check on the plants.
Yeah.
And so we just went for a ride. Carter and I stayed in the car.
Yeah.
We had no intention of going inside. There was no
No.
need. You were going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, that day, basically, of course, Peterson was in Toronto. Jordan ended up having to go up north because of a family issue.
Oh, yeah.
So I was the only CTLS person in the city.
No, wait a minute. When you say family issue, if I remember, Jordan said he had lost 2 brothers-in-law in a car accidents.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
he was, I had no idea how long he was going to be.
Yeah.
But I said, yeah, I'll cover for you. You know, Sunday is football day for me.
Yeah.
And I remember it was
How sad.
around 10:30 when the call came in, and I said, I checked the VPN because I can watch all the cameras from home.
Oh, right. Now you had access where on your laptop you were able to actually log in and view the cameras in real time and see all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now you could also take still pictures and you could save that video, like
Yep.
segments you wanted.
Yeah, I could do whatever I needed to with
Okay.
the security system. Yeah. And so I noticed that one of the reservoirs, the plants were just drinking it up, and it was way low. And you don't want to pump to dry out. So I told Jordan this, and he said, I'm gone. Like, I'm up north, I have to go. Nobody was supposed to be in there on that Sunday because everybody was off work. So I said, okay, I'll go and do it. And I remember distinctly the football game was starting at 11, so we had to book it.
I remember.
And we got there, and there was a padlock on the front gate.
No, it was a bicycle lock.
Oh, yeah, bicycle lock.
Yeah, it was a bicycle lock.
And I remember thinking, what a really cool prank. Some kid just put a, on a multi-million-dollar facility, somebody put a bicycle lock on there, and I don't have any bolt cutters, and I need to get in to save 2,800 plants, because it was getting that low. It was almost starting to cavitate the pump, right? Like, it was getting that low. I was really, otherwise I would have just put it off until Monday. But at that
Plants don't wait, eh?
No, you are at the beck and call of your plants. And so I started calling everyone, okay, like anybody that I knew. I didn't know a lot of the investors, but I called.
Well, because we were looking for bolt cutters.
Yeah, I needed bolt cutters, and we needed them quick so that I could get back to my football game. And so I called Jim Peterson, and he texted me back and said, you need to talk to either Matt Pearson or Don Stefania.
Okay.
And
Now, what role did Matt have?
he was the general manager, basically, of the facility after licensing. So we were fully licensed, and he was brought on as a general manager.
Okay.
So that I could, concentrate more on growing and training, and I do things a little different, aeroponics and hydroponics and whatnot. So there was a lot of training involved. So he was brought on as general manager.
Okay, so when you called Dom, what did Dom tell you?
I called Pearson first.
Oh.
Because he was actually an employee of River Green, and he didn't answer. So then I called Dom Stefania, and basically, Matt Pearson's phone, I said, I need a set of bolt cutters. Somebody put a bicycle lock on the gate, and I can't get in, and I have to deal with the plants. And no answer. And so at that point, I called Peterson. He said, you're going to have to call Dom. So I called Dom and asked, like, do you have a set of bolt cutters? Some kid put a bicycle lock on the gate, and I really need to get in. Because you got the fob and everything else, but it wouldn't open because of the gate lock. So he said, no, don't worry about it. We have secured the building. And I said,
Now, when you say we, do you mean like Dom? If I remember, Dom's the one that locked the gate, right?
yes, he did lock the gate. He was the one who put the padlock on the gate.
Yeah.
And he didn't elaborate on who we were. It's just the fact that he had no CTLS clearance and was in an investment group that purchased shares in River Green. Mm-hmm. And so I said, do you know what this means? Because I knew the ramifications of it. I wrote the standard operating procedures, and I knew what it meant. He didn't, because again, the reason why they did that would come out later, but it was because I was saying no too much. I wasn't a team player.
You weren't playing ball, yeah.
I play on the team of Health Canada and keeping the license and making money, for the investors who put money in. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, he said that we have secured the building. And I said, okay. And at that point, I took a picture of the lock and went home and went on my VPN and kept an eye on that reservoir. Mm-hmm. I called CCI and told them what happened on a Sunday. I called her personal phone, Purvi's personal phone, and let her know what happened. And she says, well, this has never happened to us, ever.
This in the history of the Cannabis Act?
To CCI, and they did the bulk of, at that point, the bulk of the applications, and they said, well, this has never happened to us. And I said, well, okay, so, and she says, well, yeah, you've basically been terminated. And I said, okay, good enough. Knowing that the standard operating procedures that I wrote.
But the thing is, this also violated the Cannabis Act.
Yes.
You couldn't, what they did, you couldn't do.
No. So what I did after that was I went on the computer, I had my VPN login, and about at 4 o'clock in that same afternoon, in walks Dom Schifania and Matt Pearson.
Oh, and you were watching this?
I'm watching it.
Oh, I remember this.
I recorded it.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, I remember this.
And I have them walking through without PPE, okay? Like they're just walking through with their normal clothes into the plant rooms.
Hello,
where,
bugs.
you know.
Nightmare.
And apparently they filled up the reservoir. Again, CTLS clearance has to be there. And neither one of those two had any CTLS, like they weren't.
Yeah, so what they did, they couldn't do.
They're not allowed to do.
So
which led to other ramifications. Because of that breach of the protocol, the standard operating procedures, we had to destroy all the plants.
In theory.
In theory, every plant in those rooms, 6,800 plants, should have been killed off.
Yeah, because if you don't have an RPIC and you don't have a master grower, then you really cannot have a crop.
You can't grow cannabis.
Okay, so all of the plants that were in production in River Green should have been basically destroyed the next day?
Yeah, the next working day.
Yeah. So when plants are destroyed or harvested, now this is my understanding, so tell me if I'm wrong or right, that you have to document the opening weights, the wet weight of plants, the dried weight, what was destroyed, what was thrown away, the counts, all of that stuff has to be documented in detail.
Every plant is labeled.
Okay.
Okay, so everyone has, every plant.
So that's what should have happened.
Yes.
Obviously destruction and documented destruction.
Yep.
Not just, pitching it out the back door.
Yep.
So these guys locked you out, iced out John.
Yep.
Essentially, my understanding is they wanted it all for themselves.
Yep.
Was the idea. So I think we should talk a little bit about what happened to the crop. And then we can talk about the new company that was created, and then what we experienced with the cover-up with the government and the police and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So from what I remember is that the crop was not destroyed. Let's put it this way, we came to find out the crop was not destroyed. That December 19th, 2020, what ended up happening. Now, the reason I know this is because one of the gentlemen who was one of the illegal harvesters was a friend of mine. Well, I thought he was a friend. And his name's Alex Cohn. And him and I spoke February last year, and the mistake I made was not recording it, obviously. But I do have a record of that phone call. And for about 48 minutes, Alex unloaded. Very nice young man, not a criminal mastermind. But he unloaded and he told me everything. So what he told me was that Jordan Smith, who was the head of security, a young man named Hunter, and Alex, under Jordan Smith's direction, went in December 19th, and they turned off the cameras, the 230 plus cameras,
Yep.
and harvested the crop. Then they also deviated it to the black market, allegedly, but this is what he told me. So, and I've made this statement to the police, they know all of this. So that they went in and they essentially butchered the crop, where they hacked out the bud, and all of the sugar leaf, root balls, stems, all of that were thrown into dumpsters in the parking lot. And then the bud was taken to a secondary location in Thunder Bay where it was trimmed. And this was all around Christmas time. And Jordan then said to Hunter and Alex, go and sell the cannabis in the black market. You can keep half the money and the other half give back to me. So, and they were fronted about 5 pounds each at a time to go and sell. So with there being no camera footage, which that's illegal, you have to maintain your camera record, that was turned off. And then more interestingly, the report. So Jordan Smith, when River Green died, when the crop was taken and all the money, the money was gone, there was no crop, there was no money coming in, River Green essentially went bankrupt. So at that point, River Green was bankrupt, couldn't defend itself, couldn't make payroll, couldn't do anything. Jordan Smith alerted Health Canada and prepared what's called the cessation of operations report, which means that we are relinquishing our license. Now I know, I'll get to that, I know. But it was the report that's around what happened to the crop. Now, what's interesting is instead of having all the important data like opening weights and all that Jordan put on that report, and I know this because I have it, is it says 100% destroyed. There's no weights, there's no anything, and there's no camera footage to back it up. So Alex explained to me that how it was stolen, how it went to the black market and deviated to the black market. And obviously the tax revenue didn't make it to CRA, and that the money didn't make it to River Green's bank account, and Jordan Smith kept it, and it also ended up in the hands, well, let me do this. I don't know specifically how much money or who got what. I know that Alex allegedly got half of what he sold. I know Hunter got half of what he sold, and I know that money, the other half went back to Jordan Smith. And with him being ex-OPP, that's a heartbreaker, because we thought we could trust him, but obviously not. So that's how we came to learn the specifics around the crop. Now, I didn't know that, and I didn't have that conversation until last February. So that's what really kicked it up a notch to take it from civil, like lawsuits and all that, and into a criminal investigation. So once I knew that, that's when we really reached out to
The Thunder Bay Police.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because under the Cannabis Act, the local police have the jurisdiction and are responsible to investigate any crimes around cannabis. So that's when I reached out and was connected with David Bohr, right?
Yep,
yeah,
David
David
Bohr.
Bohr. Hi, David. And John Beals went in and took another one of these binders, and we started working with Thunder Bay Police to investigate. So what was heartbreaking about that is 2-3 days ago, and I have it on my phone, I have an email from David saying, Alex Cohn has got a lawyer and he refuses to give a statement, so we're now closing the investigation. That was a heartbreaker because, I mean, and like, if you could commit a crime and then simply say, no, I'm not going to talk to you, then that causes an investigation to shut down. That pretty much brings the justice system to its knees. So that didn't make sense. And then the next day I talked to Mr. Gumbola, I think it was Sergeant Gumbola, who was above Dave, and shared my concerns. And then the next day him and I spoke, which would have been yesterday. And he said basically that the Crown, based on David's report, isn't going to move forward with charges. And I said, well, how? Like, these are criminal charges. You've got no camera footage, you've got the documents that weren't prepared properly. And in fact, I have a report in this binder from Health Canada that lists the crimes that were committed and the law that was broken as an internal document from Health Canada saying, you know, these are our concerns, these are the laws.
It was through the audit.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even with that, they still said, no, we're not touching it. So, which made no sense because he said, well, Gamboli said, this is, it's a civil matter. And I said, on what planet is the theft of millions of dollars of cannabis civil? Like, that's a criminal act. And I can't, you know, we can't bring these guys to justice, only, you know, you guys can. So if you're closing the file, they're getting away with this. And we've given you so much evidence of this, like, you know, what's going on here? So now that, you know, we've talked about the theft, we know who did what, allegedly. So we've got that basically slit the throat of River Green.
Well, that and...
Oh, McLeod. He sent one email to Health Canada saying, please basically kill our license.
Yeah, relinquish our license. He was improperly put as a director officer of River Green. A full-time employee is Sophia's Garden. And so huge conflict of interest. And basically, it was just not right. You know what I mean?
One of the things that we found out was that Jeff Burrell attended Deloitte in Toronto and demanded the documents.
The evidence package.
The entire evidence package, so all the original documents, and demanded and removed them from Deloitte's offices.
Yep.
And then returned them. I don't know if it was a day later or a few days later. But Deloitte failed to call Brad and say, is that okay if we do it? They just handed everything to Jeff. And Jeff was actually fired from River Green because it turned out that in his contract, he was not allowed to take a job with another competing cannabis company. And the bad guys that did all this with River Green, they ended up forming a new company called Sophia's Garden Artisan. And that operates outside of the same building. So the same building assets, the same guys, just that's the new company that they created to do all this. So Deloitte definitely violated some stuff there by handing that over. But I know that enabled the guys to recreate the application very, very quickly, like in minutes instead of months, and use serial numbers to the security system and use all these things to apply for a license. And Sophia's Garden actually got a license. Now, while that was going on, you guys were suing Sophia's Garden Artisan. You were suing the guys, the bad guys. And so they were under lawsuits. Now, is it correct that Health Canada says in the Cannabis Act that you cannot receive your cultivation license if you're going through lawsuits?
If you're a defendant in a litigation, you have to let the litigation play out and have an outcome, guilty or not guilty, and then they'll continue going on. So what Health Canada did was reach out to my lawyer and a number of the other lawyers and requested the litigation that was going on. All the litigation that was going on at that point was about the equipment, okay, all the assets inside the building itself, and essentially you can't get a license without owning the equipment, the security system, the big one, the 1.3 or 5, or I can't remember exactly, but it was, you have to own it and have all the licensing agreements for every camera, door swipe, everything has to be in
It's warm
place.
in here.
And so all of that was in our evidence package. So it's a copy and paste thing, change the name.
Yeah, right, basically.
Yeah. And
Because River Green bought all that stuff.
and still owns it today. Like,
Now, is it under a preservation and protection order?
It was one of the, when we first started litigation, obviously I sued River Green because of breach of contract and whatnot. Didn't know any of this story. And as soon as I found out about Sophia's Garden and the drama that was going on, I informed my lawyer that we have to stand up for River Green, the same people that we were suing, because you know, like, it's just, it was done improperly. So what I did was put a preservation protection order on all of the assets in the building, and that was on right up until
Now, it's in place now.
yeah, well, we're bankrupt now, and we were only bankrupt about 6 months ago.
Yeah, you guys got pushed into bankruptcy court.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is that preservation order was in place right up until 6 months ago. They got their license in 2022. So they have been using our equipment, our security system, River Green's whole licensing agreement, everything, right up until like now.
Yeah.
And they don't own it. So they fraudulently got their license through Health Canada, and Health Canada allowed that to happen.
Well, they knew because your lawyers reached out to Health Canada to inform them and discussed the lawsuits, but also the preservation and protection order. And if I'm correct, didn't Health Canada simply respond to your email and say, yep, we got it?
Yep. But they did respond because they did receive it.
So the other thing is that right there is what creates the financial and criminal liability for Health Canada, because they issued the license improperly to Sophia's Garden. So by doing that, that's what kind of put them in harm's way for liability. All they had to do was say, listen, Sophia's Garden, we're not giving you your license until you're free of the lawsuits as per the Cannabis Act, which would have forced Sophia's Garden to settle your lawsuits and the lawsuits of the other remaining investors, but they didn't do that. So,
in fact, they did get informed of that. John Beals and Wayne DeSherry got sued by Sophia's Garden for getting in the way of the licensing. So Health Canada on, I can't remember the exact date, but informed Sophia's Garden that we couldn't move forward with the lawsuit until River Green was settled.
wait, hold on a second. Say that again. So are you saying that Health Canada told Sophia's Garden, we can't issue your license until the lawsuits are settled?
Yes.
Well, then why did they issue the license?
Because I have no idea. There was a month or two that passed by, and after that month or two, Health Canada started the application again. There was still no transfer of basically if Health Canada stood their ground and followed their regulations and said, settle this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
It would have forced Sophia's Garden into purchasing the equipment,
Yep.
okay, and buying out the investors that did not want to be a part of Sophia's Garden,
Yep.
and then keep going.
Yeah.
But none of that happened.
So they took the building, the assets, Sophia's Garden,
Yep.
have the building, the assets, and now they're operating now. They're
Yep.
in there now.
They're in there right now as
Yeah.
of today. And they still don't own the equipment. That's still ours. We're selling it because we've been going into bankruptcy, so we have a trustee, and I'm fully intending on selling the security system, which you must have in order to have an LP.
So that means they have not been in compliance this whole time.
The entire time since their licensing.
Ooh. So now my understanding was in one of the meetings related to the bankruptcy, there was the lawyers for your side and then the bankruptcy trustee, which I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
But is it accurate that in that meeting, he actually told the lawyers on your side that Sophia's Garden had not even been operating the security system?
Yeah.
So that again violates the Cannabis Act because you have to store 2 years of data,
Yeah.
and you have to, so if the police were today attend Sophia's Garden, 600 Montreal Street, and say, pull up the camera footage from a year ago, I don't think they could. And what he said, what the trustee said in the meeting, it was his way of saying that they couldn't because they weren't using it, which is against the law. So any kind, minimal investigation by the police, which it is their jurisdiction, Thunder Bay Police, any kind of investigation, and I mean like 10 minutes worth, would expose that fact.
Well, and same with Health Canada. If you do an audit and you find deviations in the audit, they should be backing it up, checking it out.
Yeah.
And they would find out that all of the security cameras, right from the servers, the archivers, cameras, door swipe, every component, the millions of dollars that went in, is still registered to River Green. There was no transfer because there was no money.
Yeah, they didn't buy anything.
They didn't buy anything.
Now, I'm on, well, it's X now, but I was on Twitter, and my handle is at capital RRCC lowercase owner. And on that X account, I've been posting documents, photographs, and not only that, but I've also been tweeting, Xing, I don't know what it's called.
I don't either.
But asking the Prime Minister's office, the Minister of Justice, and the Minister of Health basically to look into this. And that's been for a couple of years now. So what's frustrating right now is because Health Canada has financial and I would assert criminal liability in this whole thing, they're not. They're ignoring it. And now with the Thunder Bay Police and the Crown basically saying, this is not criminal, this is civil, we're closing the investigation, it feels like a cover-up. It feels like they've swept it under the rug, essentially.
It is part and parcel. Like when we found out about Health Canada and their role in this, we went to Marcus Pulaski.
Oh, yes. And I went to Alistair McGregor here in town. And those two gentlemen, one is the MP for Thunder Bay.
And Atikokan. Yeah.
And Atikokan. And then Alistair is the MP for here in town. So what John and I did is he went locally in Thunder Bay and I went here last year and said, listen, we need you to represent us in Ottawa and ask Health Canada to look into this. Like, we need your help. And what I experienced was that the same day, so I was at Alistair's office, and about an hour after alerting his staff to this, and they alerted Alistair, he came back and had his staff inform me that Ottawa has instructed him that he is not to speak with us, he is not to deal with this, he cannot know anything about it, he cannot represent us in Ottawa. So then we were denied our government representation, excuse me, and John got the same thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I need water.
He was informed that, and Marcus Pulaski was in our jurisdiction in Thunder Bay. He visited the site, I believe. I think that he knew us well, and he knew John well, from what I understand, and so very eager to help. And it was maybe 2 days later, Marcus had his office call and says he is no longer allowed to speak on this matter whatsoever. So both MPs, not just from here, but from, they were told to step away from this.
Yeah.
And not to speak to us about any situation whatsoever about River Green Thunder Bay Inc. And I sent loads of emails to Health Canada.
For 2 years, we've been phone calls, emails, tweets, and literally Health Canada has not returned one, not one. And there's even a 45-minute recorded conversation where Brad called on the General 800 number, and nothing. So, there's 6 or 7 remaining shareholders of River Green.
Yep.
This is millions and millions of dollars. River Green would have produced about $500 million worth of bud a year. This is a huge, huge thing. And I don't think this kind of crime has ever happened in the history of Canada before. In the history of the Cannabis Act being a new law that it is. I mean, right now the laws are in place, but they have not been applied consistently and fairly. And I know that Health Canada screwed up. I mean, I know you did.
Yeah.
But, you can't use that as a justification to allow crime to happen. You can't use that as a justification to turn a blind eye. Like I said, you're going to write a check, but you're going to get it back in the fines. So you're just facing embarrassment. That's it,
Well,
But-
and it also has to be equally applied.
Yeah.
Like to every company that gets into the industry. Equal, straight across the board, whether you're a micro, a processor, or, standard cultivation, whatever it is, equally across the board.
Wait a minute. If Sophia's Garden has not had a security system and cannot produce 2 years of film footage, that means theoretically that hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars could have flowed through that place illegally and deviated to the black market. So, I think it's worth looking at.
Oh,
That is
100%.
incredible oversight. Or what's the word? Not oversight, I guess. Like, my God.
Yeah.
It's such a huge volume. We're not talking about $1 million a year. It's a lot,
Well,
So,
and especially considering if they didn't, because you have to pay, how the security system works is you have to have licenses for every component in there. If you turn a camera on, it has to have an individual license, and it's expensive. Like, you have to pay yearly. River Green never kept it up. But the serial numbers for every component in there is, through Genetech, is listed to River Green because we purchased it. And I'd be curious, just on a hand, I'd be curious to see if they even could do a camera for yesterday, let alone 2 years ago. Let's just go back to yesterday. I bet you they couldn't bring it up.
well, and the
Because
other thing
you
is
can't
that...
you can't get your licensing agreements on somebody else's equipment.
And the answer to that question could be answered tomorrow, because under the law, the local cops, so the Thunder Bay Police, sorry, it's very warm in here, they have jurisdiction. So what that means is they're allowed to go to the license holder and count plants, make sure the license is accurate. They're allowed or empowered to ask them to produce the camera footage to show that it has been operating for 2 years. They can pull up random dates. So the questions we're raising could be answered tomorrow, and the Thunder Bay Police are the ones that are required to ask them. So having them say, not civil, we won't even deal with it, at that point, that means there's no one looking, there's no police oversight, and they can't do that because under the Cannabis Act, again, I'll show you the piece of paper. It says that the local police, where the crime happened, are the ones that have to do the investigating and monitoring. So, we'd like to have answers to these questions.
That's essentially what we need, is the answers, and that's what we're hoping to get.
So what we're asking for is that a special investigator be appointed. We want Deloitte to answer for handing those documents over. We want CanDelta to answer to whether or not they received the stolen documents and use those to prepare the application for Sophia's Garden Artisan. We already know they attended the site, so they had awareness of who owned what. We want that to be looked at. We want Health Canada to answer to why they issued licenses that they shouldn't have, even though they were informed it was illegal to do so. We want to understand why the Crown and the Thunder Bay Police look at this as a civil matter, not a criminal one. And we would like everyone to be held accountable, because the losses of you and, we lost our home, our retirement fund.
Yeah.
Of over $700,000 in legal fees have been billed.
Overall, through everyone, not
on
just
this,
us, but
yeah.
everybody. Yeah.
So, this needs to be made fair and whole. And I know that Health Canada has, they don't want to open this can of worms. But here's the thing. Because these are criminal actions that these guys have done, Health Canada, I'm talking to you right now. Even if you have to pay my husband and the other shareholders some money, and you're going to have to, whatever check you're going to have to write them, you're going to be able to get that money back and actually make money on the deal, because you can impose fines. You are able, and they started, what, $1 million?
I can't remember.
Yeah,
under
they're
the Cannabis
expensive
Act.
fines, right? So you're going to be able to actually recoup whatever you have to pay these gentlemen. So, we're asking you to go after these people, hold them accountable. And the only thing that, other than the money, is your embarrassment, is that you're going to have to explain, first of all, why you ignored everybody for so long. why the Minister of Justice ignored everyone, why the Minister of Health ignored us, why the PM's office ignored us. Unfortunately, Justin, you've retired, so I can't hold you accountable even though I emailed your office. You know, I get it, it's embarrassing, but it needs to be dealt with. So my opinion has always been that bad men can't do bad things when people are looking. So hopefully the point of this video, and hopefully the outcome, is that everyone in Canada is now looking. And Health Canada, you've been trusted with weed. You've been trusted with cannabis. And that is a billion-dollar industry. So, you know, you need to prove that you are trustworthy and that you deserve to have access and control over this. So it is time to step up and make this right, because you literally lost everything because you did too good of a job.
Well, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, and everyone else, this is 5 years now. 5 years this has gone on. And if the government and the police and the Crown had followed the law and had done what they were supposed to, this would have been over years ago. So, you know, and we spent, when we left Thunder Bay, I had received a text message saying, you know, you'd better forget about River Green. You got a beautiful son there. Be ashamed if something happened to him. So when we came back to BC, we lived under the threat of death for 3.5 years. I'm done being afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. All done. Okay. So now is the time to wrap it up, is to investigate and to deal with this. And I'm hoping that with the election, it will force the issue to come to the surface. Yeah.
So.
Love you.
Love you too.